Someone at my table screamed, and with me holding my guts in with both hands, I dropped to my knees, then collapsed onto my face on the dirty floor. I'm told the place went totally wild. My table pelted the guy with bottles, not wanting him to get within arm's reach of me again. They watched him struggle to get away before a bouncer grabbed hold of his sorry bum. Never try to hurt a 6'6", 350-pound man with an attitude even if you have a switchblade. Someone said the bouncer almost ripped his arm off. Me? I was on the floor for no more than 5 minutes before being put on a stretcher by the paramedics and carried out to a waiting ambulance. I didn't have a clue what exactly happened because I had passed out. Even after I woke up in the hospital, I still wasn't sure what had gone down. The room was dark, and for a split second when I first opened my eyes, I thought I was blind. When I started focusing, I was thankful until I felt the pain, then it all came rushing back to me. At least I was still alive. How in the hell do they know at the nurse's station when someone wakes up? Magic? Within seconds, I had a nurse taking my vitals and asking me how I felt. I was stabbed. How did she think I felt? Some questions don't even rate an answer. She said I was lucky. I would have to spend another couple of days in the hospital, but after that I would probably be discharged. I wanted to know about the guy who went looking for what I'd eaten that morning in my stomach. She informed me the 2 policemen outside my door would answer all my questions. It was the usual questions I'd seen on most of the cop shows on television. Did I know him? Had I seen him before? Did he say anything to me before he did it? And finally, the big one, why? I think he was angry with me because of the argument I had with my ex-girlfriend. I gave them the nickel version. All this because I dance like a clumsy white boy? I've got to take lessons when I get my bum out of here, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. They weren't laughing and saw no humor in it. Neither did I. Your assailant is currently in custody, being charged with assault with a deadly weapon. When we review the facts, the charge may possibly be upgraded to attempted murder. I like the word attempted. I finished giving my statement, signed it, and they left saying they'd be in touch. I must have fallen back to sleep. When I woke next, the room was dark. You didn't have to go to this extreme to get me to talk to you, a voice out of the darkness said. My dad got up from a chair in the corner of the room and sat down in the one next to my bed. I'm sorry, I started to say before he stopped me. We'll talk later when you're out of here. I called your boss at home. Said he already knew about it. He told me to tell you not to worry about your job, to just get well. The doctor said you're going to be sore for a while, but nothing vital got cut. You were damn lucky. You lost a lot of blood. Luckily, a couple of your friends applied a wet compress to make sure you didn't bleed to death before the paramedics got there. I think you'll need to pick up a few dry cleaning bills and maybe buy someone a dress that was used for the compress. Anyway, you're alive and kicking. For that, I am grateful. Maybe next time you'll learn to keep your mouth shut and your head out of your butt. My dad always had a way with words. That's when the doctor came into my room. Good evening, Mr. Moore. How are you feeling? He asked, looking at my chart. Son, I've got to go and make a few more calls. I'll catch up with you later. My dad started walking out of my room. I called out to him. Love you, Dad. Love you too, son. Get some rest, and I'll see you soon. The doctor started again. You were very fortunate. Like I told your father and your wife, an inch further in either direction, and we would have had major complications. Excuse me, doctor. You said my dad and my wife. Your wife came in on the ambulance with you. Steve, you probably don't remember. You were pretty much out of it. Please explain to her that hospital policy dictates we destroy anything that comes into the hospital that has been contaminated with blood, as in the case of her skirt. First time I ever saw a beer-soaked silk compress, but it must have worked because you're still here. I will be back to see you later today. My wife. I repeated silently to myself. I'll leave you alone for a couple of weeks and you're out there pissing off some local gangbanger. I think for Christmas I'm going to get you a Kevlar vest. Then just maybe I won't have to come down to the hospital in the middle of the night to rag on you. And you don't even want to hear what Cindy had to say. Jeremy smiled. Well, now that we got that out of the way, bro, how you feeling? Just great. At least now I know what a shish kebab feels like. We laughed. We apologized to one another and brought each other up to speed. So you're married now, does she know? Very funny. However, there is only one girl I know who's got balls big enough to pull that one off. I thought the two of you broke up? We did. Or at least I thought we did. When she asked me to dance and I turned her down, she got upset. That's when her homie decided to open me up a bit. Well, you'll be out of here soon. Just think of the story you get to tell your kids someday. And if you're lucky, you'll have a great-looking scar. The women will love it. It'll be, oh, poor Steve, all the way to your bedroom. You'll probably get more sex now than you ever dreamed of. I doubted that. Jeremy stuck around for about another 20 minutes before saying something about dinner and needing to get a few hours of much-needed of sleep before going to work tomorrow. Just before he made his exit, he warned me of his next visit. I'll bring Cindy with me tomorrow night. She says she has a few choice words for you. Be still, my heart. That's just what I needed. Another woman ragging on me. I told him to wait until I got out of here before bringing Cindy over. I hope to be home by Wednesday night at the latest. That is if I live through all my visitors. The doctor returned just after a not-too-good hospital dinner, announcing I was doing as well as could be expected and would see me tomorrow. I slept great Sunday night, the best sleep I'd had in months. I guess a lot of it had to do with the amount of drugs I had in my system. I'm sure I was checked on a couple of times during the night, but I never knew it. I woke up hungry, happy, and if it weren't for the stitches in my abdomen, I would have loved to have taken a walk around the park. Legal drugs are wonderful, aren't they? By Wednesday late morning, I was in my apartment, bored, and ready to go back to work. Just don't overdo it, were the only instructions the doctor left me with. I had one final follow-up appointment in a week, and then I was on my own. Get-well cards and cookies covered my desk my first day back at work. I was the center of attention for all of the first 2 hours. After everyone's curiosity was satisfied, it was back to normal except for a few final well-wishers who occasionally stopped by. I'd left 3 emails and 2 calls to Regina to thank her for all her help, but got no replies. When Cindy came over the following night, and after reading me the riot act for the 3rd or 4th time, she said she had talked to Regina. She's sorry about what happened and feels responsible. After your blow-up, she went back to her friends and basically told them what a jackass you'd been to her. One of the group, a guy she'd only met once before, took it that you had disrespected her and decided to teach you manners, as he put it. Manners. The son of a witch almost killed me. Nice people she hangs with. Steve, Regina said that even though she didn't know this guy from Adam, she still feels partly to blame. She should. After all this, didn't you learn anything? You moron, she likes you. Why? I haven't a clue. You got your little ego hurt, and maybe she wasn't paying enough attention to you. But weren't you the one who told her she could dance with all those guys because you were too lame on the dance floor? Dance with them, yes. But she let them put their hands all over her. That's not dancing, that's mauling. Did you talk to her about it? No, you just got angry and walked away. How in the hell was she supposed to know? Between your hot temper and hers, the two of you are going to have to learn to talk, not yell at one another. Steve, girls are smart, but we're not mind readers. Call her and explain in a calm, quiet voice why you got angry. I know she'll listen. Tried, but she's not taking my calls or returning my emails. I think it's about time I move on with my life. For what, the 4th, 5th, or maybe 6th time? When are you going to get it through your thick skull that one of these days you're going to have to take a chance on someone? People are human. We all make mistakes, including you. If you want to be by yourself for the rest of your life, just keep walking away every time life throws you a curve, or you start to feel a little uncomfortable. Take a chance and maybe, just maybe, you won't be disappointed. Cindy, maybe you didn't hear me. She's not taking my calls. Steve, you're not a cripple, are you? And correct me if I'm wrong, you still have a car and know where she lives? Suck it up. Show her you have some balls for a change. I tried Friday and Saturday without much luck. At one point, I thought she actually had picked up my call, but a second later I heard that familiar dial tone. I took Cindy's advice. St. Paul's Catholic Church has 5 services on Sunday. I knew she wouldn't be at the 7 or 8 o'clock service because of Angela, which left me the 9:15, 10:30, and the noon masses. I camped out front on the church steps and waited. I struck out on the 9:15 mass, but it paid dirt when I saw Regina and her entire family coming up the sidewalk at 10 minutes after 10. I'd gone over in my mind what I wanted to say, but seeing her I forgot about 90% of it. She saw me standing there and looked over at the rest of her family. It didn't look good. She didn't even acknowledge my presence. She just walked by me and into the church. I followed her in, sitting down in a pew 4 rows back from her. My family never went to Mass. Hell, up until I met Regina, I'd only seen the inside of a church for weddings and funerals. When I went with her, I followed what everyone did. I stood, kneeled, and sat when everyone else did. Today, an elderly woman next to me handed me a prayer book and showed me what page we were on. She smiled at me and went back to reading her own hymnal. Even with her head lowered, I know she saw me when she came back up the aisle after getting her cracker, or whatever they were giving away up at the altar. 15 minutes later, the service was over and everyone started leaving the church. I lost track of her a couple of times. There were so many people and everyone was talking to everyone else. I caught up with her when she was halfway down the stairs. Regina. She stopped. Crap. Everyone stopped. Steve, what do you want? I just need to talk to you. Didn't you say enough last time? Please, just give me 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. And after that, I'll leave alone if you want me to. By the look on her face, I couldn't tell what she was thinking. Her mom whispered something to her, then looked up at me. Come on, I'm not going to have this conversation in front of God and everyone, Regina said. I followed her to her car. I assume you still know where I live? I nodded, yes. Follow me, and we can talk there. I did as instructed, even though I didn't like the thought of having this conversation with the whole family there. Mama, I'll be out back for a bit. Make sure Angela stays inside, will you? Will Steve be staying for lunch? Regina looked at me. I'll let you know shortly. She stormed out the back door with me a step behind her. We walked into the backyard, and I'd like to say away from everyone's prying eyes, but that sure as hell didn't happen. Okay, talk. You've got 10 minutes, she instructed with an attitude, her arms crossed in front of her. I'm sorry, I must be taking up too much of your precious time, I said, turning to walk away. I've been dictated to all my life, and I'm pretty much sick of it. I guess we really don't have anything to say to one another after all. Damn it, Steve, just talk to me. I have no idea what happened between us. We were good. Then you bailed on me. It made no sense. I spent the next 15 minutes explaining to Regina why I was so angry with her. You never said a word to me. Why not? I did, or at least tried to a couple of times. Couldn't you see how angry I was that night? Hell, I must have been beet red with steam coming out of my damn ears, yet all you did was ignore me. Steve, maybe I did ignore you a little, but it was never intentional. You've got to believe that. The next time I saw you, I told you I felt like you had humiliated me out there on the dance floor. I became the laughingstock of all your friends. I made sure I enunciated those last few words. Those guys had their hands all over you, and you did nothing to stop them. And when the music stopped, I saw your last partner gave you a kiss. I finally had enough, and just lost it. You were supposed to be with me, not them. I was with you. No, Regina, you weren't. Cindy came back to the table in a half hour, back to Jeremy. After another half hour, I had to physically find you, and then you still didn't come back. If I wanted to be treated like shit, I could have stayed with one of my ex-girlfriends. I thought you were somehow different. After that statement, there was this huge moment of silence. But I do want to thank you for what you did that night. I guess without your skirt, I may have bled to death. Now came the tears, hers not mine. I'm sorry. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that guy would do what he did. There was so much blood, and everyone was more concerned about him than you. The only thing I could think of was to stop the bleeding. That's when I used my skirt. Someone poured beer on it, saying the alcohol would keep the wound from getting infected. We looked at each other and broke up laughing at that statement. After a few seconds, she continued. Hey, what do I know? If you recall, it was a little chaotic at that point. It worked, didn't it? I guess I owe you a skirt. And by the way, how did we get married from the last time we talked until I was loaded into the ambulance? They weren't going to let me come, so I just said we were married, she said casually. One of the paramedics gave me a blanket to cover up, and away we went. I didn't have answers to all their questions, so I fished out your wallet and gave them your insurance cards. That's when I saw the card with the list of phone numbers and called your dad. I met him at the entrance to the emergency room and told him everything I knew. You were already in surgery, so we just waited together. When the doctor came out and asked for Mrs. Moore, we kind of looked at each other. The doctor said you were going to be okay, but would need to stay in the hospital for about 2 to 3 days. After he left, your dad and I had a little talk. He told me to go home, and he would call me after he saw you. But you never returned my calls. I figured you just wanted to yell at me some more. I already felt bad enough as it was. I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you. We were now holding hands, looking at one another, but saying nothing. Regina, honey, lunch is on the table. Her mom yelled out the back door. Are you hungry? She asked. For food? No, I replied, kissing her. We had lunch with her entire family. Afterwards, we grabbed Angela and headed to the park. While Angela played, we set down the ground rules for going forward. No more arguments, or should I say no more walking away from arguments. If we had a problem with the other, it was to be addressed and handled immediately. When we went out together, we were together, unless we both agreed otherwise. Dancing was one thing, being screwed and tattooed on the dance floor was an entirely different matter. The next two were going to be the hardest for me. Steve, you have to trust me if we've got any chance at making it. You have to believe I have only your best interests at heart and will never, I repeat, never cheat on you. But you have to promise to do something for me that you may not like doing. I was getting a little uncomfortable. You have to make peace with both your dad and your mother. You can see them separately or together, but it needs to be done. I couldn't believe what she was asking of me. Hell, no. No way. No how. I don't have a problem with my dad. We've already talked and we're okay. But my mom, that's a whole other can of worms. I don't even have a clue where she's living. It shouldn't be too hard to find that out. You're smart, computer savvy, and still know her last name. How hard can it be? What's the point? I haven't seen or spoken to her in years. I have absolutely zero interest in seeing her again. Those two made you who you are now, and you need to confront, or should I say talk to the both of them. There are too many unresolved issues and open wounds. You're not that little 5-year-old kid anymore, and you need to close that chapter of your life forever. Forgive them and move on with your life, which hopefully me and Angela will be part of. She was asking a lot, but I knew she was right about this. Regina didn't want to be there, but I insisted. Be it good or bad, if we were going to move forward together, I wanted her to meet the two people responsible for molding me into what I was. It took a week for my dad to agree to a sit-down meeting with my mom. I wanted to see them together. First, I did not want to have to go through this more than once. And secondly, I didn't think anything could be resolved unless they also made peace with each other. He finally relented as long as it was on his terms and only if we agreed to do it at his house, something about home turf. And my mother? Well, she agreed almost immediately, something about wanting to see me again. So on Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, with nothing stronger than iced tea to drink, we all sat down in my dad's living room. You could have cut the tension with a knife. My dad had moved the living room furniture around so everyone would be sitting in a big circle around a large coffee table. This way you could see everyone without being close enough to touch anyone. Before we started, I introduced Regina to my mom. My dad already knew her, having met her that night in the hospital. I told them it was my idea to have her there and that her presence and support was important to me. After the pleasantries were over, I began. I know this is hard for everyone, but it's long overdue. Everyone seemed to be either playing with their drink or nervously fidgeting in their seat. We may not all like each other, but we've all got a common denominator. Me. Mom, Dad. I don't know what transpired between the two of you, nor do I care at this particular point anymore. But what your actions did was to scar a 5-year-old boy in ways you can't even begin to imagine. I turned to address my father. Dad, telling me to suck it up and be a man might have worked for you. But I went from living in what I thought was a happy home to one with a hard-nosed father and an overly protective grandmother. The only thing you taught me was to keep my guard up because someone was always going to screw me over given the chance. Up until only a short time ago, I believed you. That is until I met someone who has only my best interests at heart. I gave Regina's hand a squeeze. Then it was my mom's turn. Mom, what you did to Dad and me was inexcusable. You don't bail on your child. If you and Dad weren't getting along, that was your problem. I can see you thought your only way out was to leave, but leaving the way you did tore my heart out. You are my mother. You were supposed to love me, not leave me. All those promises you made that we would be together again were like giving me a taste of candy and then pulling it away. It got to the point where I felt you no longer wanted to see me anymore. You were building your new life without me being a part of it. How long has it been since you last spoke to me? 6, 7 years. How many phone calls, cards, and birthdays did you miss? And why? Didn't you, don't you, care about me anymore? Or were you, are you, just too ashamed you'd let it go this long? The tears were falling as my mother tried but failed to get the words out, so I continued. No matter what, you're still my mom, and nothing can ever change that. But going forward, how much you're going to be in my life depends on what happens here today. Both of you need to realize one thing. I don't need either of you in my life. I want you there, but I no longer need your support or acceptance. We're all getting older, and one of these days I'm going to get married and probably have kids. I want the two of you to be part of all our lives, and I hope, you do too. That opened up a round table discussion. For the next hour, I'm sorry, was the phrase of the moment. My dad talked, not yelled, at my mom for the first time since the day she walked out on us. They were never going to get back together or even be friends for that matter. But if they could at least remain civil towards one another, I could accept that. For the first time, I found out that my mom had remarried and was happy, but would give anything to have me back in her life. My dad was still bitter, and when he started hashing up old issues, I put an immediate stop to it. Dad, this is about me, or should I say the three of us, not you and Mom. If the two of you want to go at it again, please wait until Regina and I leave, then you can tear the house down if that's what you want to do. I'd gotten control back. When things settled down again, I let Regina tell them a little bit about herself. She explained to them about our rocky relationship, adding that she was committed to it. She told them she felt this discussion was important if the relationship was really going to flourish. In the 2 hours we talked, issues were resolved, and get-togethers were planned, especially around the holidays. Though total peace wasn't established, at least the hatchet wasn't buried in someone's skull this time around. We all hugged one another, exhausted and emotionally drained, but with smiles, we called it a day. Driving back to her parents' house, Regina let me know how she felt about what had just taken place at my dad's. "Stephen Moore, I am so proud of you. You're a strong, wonderful, caring man, and I'm so glad I'm with you." "How glad are you?" I said with a wicked smile. "Drive on. We don't have time for what you're thinking about. Remember you promised Angela we'd take her shopping and out to dinner if she was good. I think I'd rather have her mother bad and in my bed right now." She wasn't taking the bait. "There'll be plenty of time for that. But later." I pouted, even though I knew it would do me no good. Regina's mother's eyes wanted to know it all when we walked through the front door, but she held her tongue. I figured she and Regina would talk later. We grabbed Angela and headed to the mall in less than 5 minutes. Regina and I each picked out an outfit for Angela. Personally, I think my choice looked a whole lot better on her. I paid for both outfits and dinner at Pizza Hut. It had been a long day for all of us, and we were all pretty well drained from it. After Regina put Angela to bed, we sat out in her backyard holding one another and sneaking in a few kisses when we thought no one was looking. At 9 o'clock, after a very nice kiss, I decided to call it a night. "I want to go to the 9:15 service, so be here no later than 8:45, she announced, walking me out to my car. With one more kiss, I headed for home for some much-needed sleep. "Where's Angela?" I asked the following morning. "She's going with my mother to the 10:30 Mass. It's just you and me this morning." Everyone knew everyone else. It was more like a social gathering outside the big Catholic church with everyone updating everyone else about what had occurred during the week. I wasn't a fixture, but I could tell they all knew who I was, probably knowing more than I cared for them to know. It was the same on our way out. Saying goodbye to everyone and telling them we would see them next week took at least 15 minutes. With Regina next to me in the front seat, she announced she wanted to stop at one of the local bakeries. She picked out a couple of items we both liked and got us each a cappuccino. "If you don't mind, I'd like to have breakfast at your apartment for a change." Did I mind? Hell no. I lived for the time when I could get her all to myself, which wasn't often enough. It was nice, sipping on coffee and enjoying the warmth of a nice summer Sunday morning during the 10-minute drive to my place. Relaxed is what I felt. We walked hand in hand into my apartment. Arms, lips, and tongues are what I was greeted with when I turned around after shutting the door. There was no discussion, no idle conversation, or any of the like. Regina had her own agenda for this morning, and it wasn't breakfast. I was just thankful my bedroom wasn't as messy as it usually is. Breakfast was delayed by about 2 hours that morning. Do you know what it's like to have a curvy woman in your arms? Wonderful. I had expected this to happen sooner than later, but after yesterday, I thought we'd just be talking again this morning, working out the rest of our issues. I guess this morning there weren't any pressing issues to work out. When I went down on her, but I wasn't sure exactly what to expect. Regina wasn't as vocal as I thought she would be. I'm not as big around as a Coke can, but I get the job done. It might have been my insecurity showing through, but I was out to prove to her that I was the best lover she had ever had. I did everything by the numbers and even had to think about my ugly 5th grade teacher when I was about ready to shoot off before Regina had. As soon as I felt her let loose, I gave her the load I'd been saving just for her for the last 4 months. When she climaxed, I thought she'd cracked a couple of my ribs with her legs tightly wrapped around me. She was still pushing up against me 20 seconds after we'd both finished. I was starting to shrink and beginning to feel the discomfort from leaning on my elbows for so long, not wanting to crush her with my way, when she suddenly rolled me over on my back. "That was nice. That was really nice," she said. "Nice? Nice?" I thought to myself, thinking I'd given it my best shot, and it was only nice? I think I at least rated it great, or maybe even a wonderful. Nice didn't seem to cut it for me right now. My male ego had taken a shot, and I think Regina picked up on my dilemma. That was the nicest and most gentle lovemaking I've ever experienced. I felt so close to you that if I would have been any closer, I would have been inside you. Well, that's good because I only want one of us inside at a time. It was a stupid joke, which earned me a punch in the arm, but also another kiss. I need a shower, and so do you. We can't very well go back to my mom's place smelling like sex, can we? I don't know. Why don't we try it and see what happens? Let's see. A close, overly protective, and extremely traditional Catholic family on one hand, and a guy who they are just starting to trust, bringing their daughter back from church smelling like they've been screwing all night? You'd be dead before you made it back to your car. She was smiling, but I'd lost my erection as she pulled me towards the bathroom. Regina, they know you're not a virgin. They must figure you're doing it at least a little. Steve, thinking it and having it thrust in their faces are two entirely different scenarios. If they don't see it, they don't worry about it. They trust their daughter. We got each other off again in the shower without killing ourselves, but it was touch and go when she pulled the shower curtain down. After devouring our breakfast, sex sure works up an appetite. We headed out to Regina's house. I held the car door open for her. She got in, adjusted her seatbelt, fluffed up her hair, and was looking in her vanity mirror putting on some lipstick when I moved over, kissed her. And just before I turned on the car engine, I proceeded to further complicate matters. Without thinking, I nonchalantly announced, "I love you." Just as nonchalantly, I started the car, began heading out of the parking lot when she yelled, "Stop." She leaned over and turned my car off. "What the hell did you just say to me?" I unfastened my seatbelt, reached over to a surprised Regina, kissed her on the lips, and said again I loved her. I restarted my car and took off for the second time. "Steve, we have to talk about this." "I know, but is this the time or place?" "Well, my parents' house sure as hell isn't the place. Just answer me one question. Do you care for me?" "Yes, but..." she started to say when I stopped her. "There are no buts. I care for you. You care for me. What else matters?" "Well, I can think of one person that comes immediately to mind. Regina, you and Angela are a package. I've known that from day one, and you didn't see me heading for the hills, did you? There are probably going to be a lot of issues, but together we'll tackle them one at a time. If we love each other, the rest is just superfluous bullshit." She didn't quite agree with me because right now she was up there somewhere in the clouds. "We need to talk, just not at Mama's house. I still don't know where you want to take this, and your ideas and mine may not be the same. Well, we could turn around and head back to my place. Only I'm warning you, once I got you back inside, I would have other things on my mind. Just like a guy. Give him a taste, and he wants to make a steady diet of it." We looked at each other and burst out laughing. "Just drive, Mom is expecting us for lunch." Lunch was good as always. And like always, they kept pushing food at me and then looked disappointed when I refused it. "How you going to gain weight if you don't eat? Your skin and bones," her mother would say, putting this or that on my plate. Regina couldn't take her eyes off me, especially when I was talking with either her mother or grandmother. When I let my hands wander a bit, she'd elbow me, her eyes saying her family was watching. "You want to give them a show they won't soon forget?" I whispered in her ear. The look I got in return said no way, no how. I kept my hands to myself. Regina's grandmother was sitting to my other side. Just guessing, she had to be at least 80, but could have been 90 for all I knew. She was spry but thin, and looked old. During dessert, she leaned over to me and pointed at my plate. "You like this?" she said, referring to the dessert. "Yes, it's very good," I said, with a smile on my face, trying to be overly polite. "I made it," she replied, puffing up her chest. This was followed by another proclamation. "My granddaughter is a beautiful woman. No?" "Yes, she is." I looked to my other side at Regina, who was talking to someone on the other side of her. "Since you're already sleeping with her, don't you think it's time the two of you got married?" With that business out of the way, she put the last forkful of her dessert into her mouth. I only choked a little, reaching over for my tea to wash down what was left in my mouth. My mind was racing. How could she know? Shit, we had only done it for the first time this morning. Was she a witch or something? When Grandma swallowed what was left in her mouth, she picked up right where she left off. "The way the two of you look at each other reminds me of my late husband. He was never satisfied. That man could go on for hours. How I ever got anything done with him around still mystifies me." I looked over at Regina and mouthed the word help, hoping she would understand my meaning. "Well, I hope it's soon. I'm not getting any younger, you know, and I'd hate to die before it happens." With that, she patted my arm. I was very glad when Regina came to my rescue. "Grandma, I've got to introduce Steve to Aunt Claire before she leaves." "No problem, sweetheart. Steve and I were just getting to know each other a little bit better." When Grandma's eyes met mine, they said it all. "You didn't tell anyone we had sex before we got here, did you?" "Steve, do you think I'm nuts? I sure as hell don't have a death wish, do you?" "Well, your grandmama said that since we're having sex, I should make an honest woman out of you. That along with a brief history of her sex life with your grandfather. Holy shit, way too much information. Regina was now laughing into her hands. Go ahead and laugh. You saw I almost choked on my custard. Think how cute that would have been with her giving me mouth to mouth. Yuck. The only one who is going to be giving you mouth to mouth is me. With a quick look to make sure no one was looking, she gave me a big kiss. It was kind of spooky, but every Sunday Grandma kept her eyes on me, especially if I was with either Angela or Regina. My discussions with Regina became more serious and included all topics, including Angela. Would I adopt her if we got married? Would I become Catholic? Where would we live? How many kids did I want? These were all questions she wanted answers to, only sometimes I had none. Things were progressing rapidly, and it was scaring the hell out of me. We double dated a lot with Jeremy and his wife, Cindy. They'd taken the plunge last year and wondered why I was dragging my feet. My family was closer than it had been in years. I made it a point to talk to both my dad and my mom weekly. We were working on our relationships, but sometimes it was like pulling teeth. It was hard to recapture so much lost time in a few months. But I was about to shake things up again. It happened Sunday, March 14th. Regina and I were as compatible as anyone I'd ever met. Work was going great, and for once I was happy with my life. My lease was coming due the 1st of May, and I'd already told them I wasn't going to renew. Instead of replacing my 10-year-old car, I got the engine rebuilt and a few other things done, so it was good for another 100,000 miles. I had better things to do with my money. Often there were 20 to 25 plus people at her mom's most Sundays after church. It was potluck, and everyone brought something to share for the meal. Regina and I had stopped off at the bakery after church and picked up 4 loaves of freshly baked Cuban bread. They were still hot when we put them in the back seat next to Angela. In the trunk of my car, I had a large cooler of ice and a few other items I'd need a bit later. When we walked into the house, Regina went into the kitchen, and I left to find her grandmother, which was quite a challenge. Luck was with me because that Sunday she was sitting by herself on the couch just watching what was going on. I went and sat down next to her. Hi, Grandma. How are you feeling today? She smiled and said, with the exception of a little cough, she felt like a 70-year-old. I've got something to show you, I said, looking around for Regina and her mother. It's a little something I bought for your granddaughter. I just want to know if you think she'll like it. I pulled out the ring from my top pocket and showed it to her. She didn't cry, scream for joy, or much of anything. She just looked at it, smiled, nodded her head, and gave me a kiss on the cheek. With her wrinkled hand on my arm, she said she'd love it if it was a cigar ring given to her by you. So, I have your blessings then? She didn't respond, only again nodded her approval. I gave her a kiss on her forehead. My palms were sweaty, my heart was racing, and I had no appetite, but managed to force down a few bites. Regina was sitting on a bridge chair, with a plate of food on her lap next to one of her aunts and her mother. They were all talking a mile a minute. I took my last swallow of tea, relaxed my shoulders, took a deep cleansing breath, and moved forward. I knew if I hesitated I'd chicken out. I had already chickened out once before. Regina saw me walking towards her and was smiling at me. I loved that woman more than I had loved anyone ever. She was about to say something to me when I dropped down on one knee in front of her. I had this grandiose speech planned about how much I loved her and Angela, which would have probably gone on and on way too long. What happened is, I got a little tongue-tied and cut it short. Regina Diaz, I love you, and you would make me the happiest man on earth if you would consent to be my wife? She didn't expect it, especially not right there in her parents' living room. No one did except her father and grandmother. I knelt there holding that damn ring, waiting for what must have been an hour as she teared up, put her arms around my neck, and kissed me. Everyone went nuts. I'd already done the proper thing by asking for Regina's hand from her father a week ago. When I walked through the door today, I handed him my car keys, and I told him there was a cooler in the trunk of my car with a few bottles of champagne we might need a little later. He took the keys, shook my hand, and told me good luck because I would need it afterwards. He was right. Pandemonium is what broke out as every woman in the place wanted to see the ring that was already on her finger. And Regina? She wasn't letting go of me. Know how? I was at arm's length, and that's all the further she'd let me go for the next hour. The women were now all talking at once and loud. When Angela walked into the room to see what the ruckus was all about, Regina grabbed her and told her that she was going to have a new daddy. I think it went in one ear and out the other, but I did get a hug out of the deal. Looking over at her grandma, I could see her smile. It was a big day for her, too. Her father and brothers brought in the champagne. Glasses were filled, toasts were made, and I was officially welcomed into the family. While the women started planning the wedding, her dad, brothers, and the rest of the men took me out back where the hard stuff was brought out. I only lasted 3 rounds until I thought I was going to hawk up a lung. They laughed, telling me I'd get used to it. That was the longest Sunday brunch I can remember ever having attended. By 7 o'clock, it was winding down. Everyone congratulated us one more time as they walked out the front door. I was going to be leaving soon. Therefore, I was sipping on a glass of cold iced tea. I had already drunk too much earlier and wasn't taking any chances of getting a DI today of all days. I watched Regina help her mother and grandmother with that smile still plastered on her glowing face. When she came over to me, the kiss she gave me about pushed me over the edge. I guess it was okay to show me a little affection in front of her family now that we were engaged. Why did you do it in front of my whole family? She asked me when we were alone, giving me another kiss for good measure. I thought about it for a long time. Considering how close your family is, I decided to include them in what I hoped would be one of the happiest moments of our life together. It would be like, in a way, bringing our 2 families together. Well, it worked, and you sure as hell impressed my parents, not to mention making a few boyfriends in the room a little uncomfortable. You never cease to amaze me. I do my best. By the way, what would you have done if I had said no? Well, I know this hot older lady, and if she is half as good as her stories, she probably would have killed me on our honeymoon. A-hole. I can guarantee you that you aren't going to be able to walk by the time I'm finished with you. Isn't that what I'm supposed to be saying to you? We laughed. The sexual tension was hanging heavy in the air right now. With Regina in my arms, I wanted to take her home with me and spend the next 2 hours showing her what we'd be doing nonstop on our honeymoon. It seemed her mother was not ready to let me leave just yet. She wanted to do a little wedding planning first. So, for the next hour, me, Regina, her mother, grandmother, and 2 of her aunts sat around talking wedding. Not exactly how I had planned to culminate my proposal day. Monday and Tuesday nights were spent made the rounds telling everyone the good news. We first met with my dad, who wasn't surprised at all, and then with Jeremy and Cindy, who both said it was about time. I couldn't tell if my mom was surprised or not. Though she seemed genuinely happy for us, I detected something under the surface. No matter, I really didn't care if she liked it or not. It was a done deal, in our eyes, anyway. When Regina asked when I wanted to get married, I told her the sooner the better because I had to be out of my place by the end of April. We're going to have to find a new apartment and be ready to move the last week of April, so we don't have a lot of time. Location became the main issue. She still wanted to be close to her parents, and I wanted to be close to my work. We had a bit of a conflict. I finally located her job, my job, and her parents' house on a map and drew a circle around all 3. This is where we need to look. A friend of her second cousin's neighbor had a 2-bedroom place for rent. I guess marrying into a big extended family has its advantages. The place was spacious, clean, and I could live with the shitty view of the parking lot for what he was charging us. We signed a year's lease and were told we could move in any time after the 27th of April. After our first wedding get-together on the day of my proposal, I tried to stay as far away from the wedding plans as possible. I would be there, tux or no tux. As long as there was something for me to eat and drink, I was happy. It was, after all, the bride's moment to shine. I thought they were pulling my leg when they told me that they'd set the date for first Saturday in May. I figured the earliest it could be was at least June. Guess I underestimated the Diaz women. Within 2 weeks, the hall had been secured and the food taken care of. The invitations had been ordered and were already being printed. I asked my mother if she wanted to have any input. Besides her being there, she was letting my future bride's family run with it. Not until our wedding night? I said a little too loudly when Regina told me her plan the following Saturday night. Think about how excited you're going to be by then, she explained, now a little more hesitantly. Honey, by then all the priest will have to say is, I now pronounce you husband and wife, and when you kiss me, I'll probably shoot my wad in my pants. I wasn't kidding. Well, I didn't say we couldn't do anything, did I? She snuggled up close to me. There are other things we can do besides that, isn't there? I could think of at least 10 off the top of my head at that moment. Later that evening, we quietly tried out at least 3. I just might survive until the wedding. I could go on forever about our wedding, so let me just sum it up this way. When I saw my bride walking down the aisle with her father and mother, right then and there I realized she was by far the most beautiful creature on this blessed earth. I may be a little biased, but mere words can't come close to describing how utterly lovely she looked, and she was soon to be all mine. Secondly, there was enough food and drink to feed a small third-world country. Of the 128 guests, my side amounted to all of 11 people. On her side, The other 117 most brought something to eat or drink. I'd never been to a potluck wedding. I knew it wasn't going to be my last. Finally, my mother and Regina had planned our honeymoon without telling me or giving me any input. Trust me, was all they would say. It was a nice wedding gift sentiment. Only I would have liked a little say in the matter. And the worst part of it was that she wouldn't tell me much more than I'd love it just like I loved her family. Was I scared? Well, maybe a little. Babes, how can I pack if I don't know where we're going? Just pack for very warm and humid conditions. That wasn't helping. But you will need your good suit and your dancing shoes. Regina, I have a much better idea. Why don't you and my mom pack for me? This way I'll be sure to have the right clothing. I said it in a sarcastic tone of voice. She must have missed that part of it because the day before our wedding, 2 of the biggest suitcases I owned had a tag with my name on it. I was screwed. It was almost midnight and the wedding was still going strong. As much fun as I was having by now, I had other ideas on my mind. My blue balls were going to get a little relief tonight. I snuck up behind my bride, kissed her on the neck, and told her that she'd made me the happiest man on earth. She looked at her watch, yelled for her mother, and told me it was time to get changed. Changed for what? Our honeymoon, silly. An hour later, the 4 of us were packed into her dad's SUV with enough luggage for a trip around the world. With her mother and father in the front seat, Regina and I cuddled up as close as 2 people could get in the back seat. When we pulled into the airport 45 minutes later, I'd had just about enough. When we stopped at the curb by the Southwest Terminal gate, I decided it was time for answers. I stopped dead in my tracks, put up my hand to halt the whirlwind happening around me. Okay, wait. I'm not taking another step until you tell me where we're going. The 3 of them looked at one another. Regina finally answered my question. Puerto Rico to start, and we've got just over an hour and a half before our plane departs. Well, at least I knew we were headed south. In our seats, first class no less, just before we finally lifted off, Regina handed me our itinerary for the next 7 days. We were going on a 7-day Southern Caribbean cruise starting in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Her extended family met us at the airport where we were whisked away to someone's house just outside of town. English was spoken occasionally, Spanish being the main language of the moment. Introductions were made and we were shown a room where we could get cleaned up and some rest. Get some sleep or whatever else the 2 of you want to do. The rest of the family will be here about 11:30 in the morning for the party. Her cousin winked at us and shut the door. I turned to Regina with a big question mark on my face. Rest of the family? Party? My family down here wants to throw us a wedding party. Family? Just how big is your family? Call me a wimp, but my body let me down. I had the hottest woman on the planet lying naked next to me on my wedding night and I fell asleep. In my defense, it was 6 o'clock Sunday morning, and I'd been up for the last 24 hours getting married and partying like there was no tomorrow. I was dead on my feet. I woke up with a thick pair of lips around me. I was a little disoriented for a couple of seconds before I realized I wasn't in Kansas any longer, and I loved what my new bride was doing. A little mutual oral pleasuring culminated with a quiet quickie, and we were in the shower laughing and trying not to damage anything. There must have been 50 people at the party. First and second cousins, old friends, new friends, everyone was there. Again, more food and alcohol appeared on tables set up all around the living room. More than enough, it seemed, to feed the whole island. After partying for another 3 hours, I started silently praying we'd make it to the ship on time and sober. Everyone wanted to meet the new husband, and since Regina had been gone for 10 years, there was a lot of catching up to do. At 5 o'clock, I told her it was time. We loaded everything into the car and headed for the port. I was looking forward to 7 days alone with my new bride. The cruise was nonstop activity. That's if you wanted to do anything. There were 6 stops: St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Barbados, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, and St. Martin. We would end back up in San Juan on Sunday morning. We never made it to dinner the first night at sea. We ate in our cabin on the balcony and reconnected with each other after the previous 2 days of nonstop action. Regina said she packed a special treat for me for each night of our cruise. If the rest were half as hot as Sundays, we'd probably never make it to the dining room for any meals. By Tuesday, we needed a break. One of the legs on our bed had broken off. The steward assured us it would be replaced by night. He gave me a wink, telling us they'd bring one that was a little sturdier. We took leisurely walks in the Virgin Islands and Barbados, purchasing a few souvenirs, though most of the stuff was geared towards the tourists and didn't interest either one of us. While we dressed for dinner, I thought about skipping it again. Han, you want to skip dinner and order in again tonight? Not on your life. I want to see something of this ship before we dock back in San Juan on Sunday morning. Besides, I really want to check out the food in the dining room. I relented after a promise of something special when we got back to our room later that night. Our whole table watched as we took our seats and ordered a bottle of wine. We weren't sure if we'd see the two of you at all this trip, said one of the middle-aged women. I understand you're on your honeymoon. Regina smiled and said they were replacing the bed in our room because somehow we'd worn it out. I think I turned red when the whole table broke out laughing. The food was great, the company entertaining. We were having the time of our lives. You've got to make it to the adult comedy show at midnight, one of the women told Regina. It's only for adults if you know what I mean. I'm not sure I can hold off my husband that long, but we'll try and make it. Save us a seat for tonight, will you? We walked the ship after dinner, played a bit in the casino, and finally hit the dance clubs. I did better than I'd ever done before. I made it a whole hour before sitting down. As I rested, Regina kept moving to the music standing next to our table. When a guy came up and asked her to dance, she looked over at me. It didn't take her long to make up her mind. She smiled at her suitor, then politely refused his offer, showing him her wedding ring. You could have danced one dance with him, I whispered to her. Been there, done that, and never again, especially on our honeymoon. I got my bum off the chair and went back out onto that dance floor. The comedy club was packed, but we did finally find our dinner companions. Most were feeling no pain. Since no one was driving, most likely they figured they might as well enjoy themselves. The comic was so funny, I almost peed in my pants. I laughed so hard. When he started picking on people in the audience, I slid a little deeper into my chair. Where is that newlywed couple that broke the bed in their cabin and had to have it replaced? Our dinner group pointed to us. Looking at how hot your wife is, it's no wonder. If you get too tired, I'm in room 1041, that's 1041. Everyone was laughing, but it was the good-natured kind. Regina, not one to let anyone get the best of her, shot right back at him. Well, if you've got more than my husband's 12 inches, let me see it, and then maybe we might be able to work something out. How about if I give you 6 inches twice, was his quick comeback. To be half as good as my husband, you'd have to be able to do it at least 4 times. The audience again erupted into gales of laughter. But if you don't mind, we have another bed to try out, she said, taking my hand. I've also been told no one has ever gone through more than 2 beds on a 7-day cruise, but they've never met my husband. We walked out to a standing ovation. Babes, unless you're confusing me with someone else, I don't have 12 inches. I know, and you know, but the rest of the women on the ship don't. She was smiling now. I got more than a once-over by lots of women the rest of the cruise. I'm sorry to say, we didn't break the broken bed record. We gave it our all. It didn't happen. Sunday morning saw us back in San Juan, and by 10:30 we were on the Big Bird going home. It was an exhausting and memorable 7 days, to say the least. Through those 7 new outfits, we could relive our honeymoon night after night. We slept most of the way back because we knew our new reality would hit the moment we got off the plane, and it was waiting for us. Mommy, Mommy, Angela screamed, running up to Regina. I got a hug and kiss, but 99% of her joy was directed at her mother. All the way back to our apartment, we tried to summarize 7 days into 45 minutes. With work starting tomorrow, we all went to bed early, knowing we would be waking up to our new normal. Life was better than good. I was usually met at the door with kisses and hugs from both my women. I made it a point to bring home something special for Angela every Friday evening. It didn't have to be much. She just knew something was going to be there. Once I almost forgot. I got to our house when I realized I'd forgotten her little gift. I quickly hit the corner drugstore to pick up a small stuffed animal. You know you're spoiling her. You're never going to be able to keep it up. She was right. So from that Friday forth, I gave her $1 for her piggy bank. Now she would meet me at the door holding her bank. After a big kiss and hug, $1 was deposited into her pink piggy bank. The only thing I did was mix it up. Sometimes change and sometimes paper money, but it was always there. It was the week before my out-of-town inspection. Regina seemed a little off, and by that I mean the honeymoon feelings seemed to be waning. She was still waiting for me, but something was missing. Though we still made love most nights, if I didn't know better, I'd swear something was on her mind. I had to be out of town for almost 4 days. I called every night, and she said she missed me, but that damn undertone was there. On the plane ride back, I slept as much as possible because I knew I most likely wouldn't get any sleep my first night back. It was the first time we'd been apart since we got married 3 months ago. When I pulled up the driveway and opened the front door, nothing. No kiss, no hug, nothing. Honey, I'm in the kitchen. I heard her yell out at me. She was stirring something on the stove. Wiping her hands with a towel, I got my hug and kiss a little later than I had expected. Maybe I was expecting too much. She was a little quiet, however Angela more than made up for it. "Regina, you okay? Are you coming down with something?" "I'm fine, just a little tired, I think. By the weekend, I'll be back to normal." She wasn't. My wife spent an extraordinary amount of time at her mother's or on the phone with her. It might have been just a little post-wedding letdown, or maybe I wasn't being attentive enough. Whatever it was getting worse. When she snapped at me Friday night for giving Angela $2 instead of one, I knew something was definitely wrong. When she countered that nothing was wrong, I told her I didn't believe her. That damn little voice in my head started talking to me again, and I didn't like what it was saying. Saturday morning, Regina said that she was going to confession at the church. Since I'd known her, she'd never gone to confession. Being as Catholic as she was, what the hell did she have to confess that was so bad? When she got back, I could immediately tell she'd been crying. Whatever she was hiding was tearing her apart, and indirectly me, too. "Regina, honey, we need to talk today." "I know, and we will when Angela goes to bed tonight." The inner voices got a hell of a lot louder. Dinner was simple, but neither one of us could eat much. A little television, a quick bath, 2 chapters of her favorite book, and Angela was down for the count. I found my bride in the living room waiting for me. "Do you want to start, or do you want me to just start asking questions?" I said, trying not to be confrontational. "Steve, you have to promise me you aren't going to get mad, no matter what." "Regina, I don't know if I can promise that. It depends on what you're going to tell me. Please, promise me." She was now crying. "Okay, I promise. No matter what you tell me, I won't get mad." "Steve, you know how we talk about everything and make all important decisions together? It was one of the things we both agreed upon before we got married." "Okay, so what didn't we decide together? Just remember, it wasn't entirely all my fault. It's just that I mean. For Christ's sakes, Regina, spit it out." I was speaking a little louder than I meant to. "Steve, I'm pregnant. I know you wanted to wait until we moved into a house." "I'm so sorry. How could it happen? When?" I was in shock, to say the least. "Sometime during our honeymoon, the best I can figure. But you're on the pill. Did you miss a day or something?" "Nope, I checked. I went on the pill 2 days before we left, and I made sure to take a pill every day. We had used condoms up to this point. Sometimes it was after we did it or first thing in the morning. My gynecologist doesn't have an answer either. She said I probably should have started a month earlier to regulate my cycle, but even then sometimes it just happens. Nothing is 100% foolproof. But no matter how it happened, we are going to have a baby. Please, don't hate me." She was starting to lose it again. "I told my mom and my priest, and both told me that I shouldn't be keeping this from you. They were right. How can I be angry with the mother of my child?" "Sweetheart, we're going to have a baby. I'm so happy." She screamed for joy, jumped into my arms, and gave me a huge salty kiss. All right, I'd lied, but I wasn't Catholic, so it didn't matter. I was neither elated nor totally unhappy. I really wanted to wait until we were a little more settled. But it happened, and I was going to be 100% on board, no matter what. That night, I thought we were back on the cruise ship, as she tried to drive me through the bed, riding me. I was about to tell her I was ready for the midnight buffet on the Lido deck, when she wanted to go again for a second and then a third time. "We're going to have to do it a lot, because soon it's going to be a lot harder with a big bump in front." I was thankful when she tired out. I figured she'd blab our news to everyone at Sunday Mass. She said nothing, which kind of surprised me. However, when we walked into her parents' house, all hell broke loose when she confirmed to her mother that she had finally told me. Non-stop happy, excited yelling and screaming became the norm that day as all the women huddled together, this time making baby plans. The menfolk gave me their condolences. They told me I didn't have a clue what was going to happen to me. They wished me luck because I would need it. Grandmama sat quietly by herself. I walked over to her with a dessert for the both of us. "Well, you made it," I told her. "You saw your granddaughter get married. Now, if I can just live long enough to see my new grandchild born. You're going to outlive us all, and you know it. Just be thinking about a name or two." We decided we don't want to know what gender the baby is until he or she is born. She smiled, patted my hand, and gave me a kiss on the cheek. "Steve, you're a good man. Regina and Angela are both lucky to have you. Just promise me you'll treat them like the treasures they truly are." I gave her my solemn promise they would be my main priority in life. I had officially adopted Angela shortly after we were married. Her biological father was thrilled to sign away his parental rights, no one coming after him for child support anymore, and I was thrilled to legally be Angela's father. Han, is your grandmother sick or something? No. What gives you that idea? Just the way she was talking today, like she was kind of saying goodbye. She is just happy for the two, or should I say, the three of us. I can't wait until she sees our beautiful baby. I'm sorry to say that 2.5 months later, her grandmother passed on. It was sudden to us, but I don't think to her she somehow knew. They say when one door closes, another opens. I thought our baby would be the door that opened, a replacement for her grandmother. I never counted on losing someone in my family too. Unbeknownst to everyone, except her new husband, my mother had been diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. She had been getting radiation treatments and the doctors thought they had it under control. It had shrunk enough so the doctors thought it would be possible to remove it. Why she put off the surgery so long is anyone's guess. The only reason her husband could surmise was perhaps she thought if the operation went badly she'd never live to see her only grandchild. A couple of months later it came back with a vengeance and now is inoperable. Our daughter was born January 14th at 4 a.m. in the morning. Everyone, and I do mean everyone, was there, except my mother. 3 days later I was laying our new daughter on my mother's chest in her hospice bed. She had hung on by her fingernails to see her grandchild. I'm not sure she was all there, but her eyes told me she was there enough to enjoy the moment. The next 2 days were tough. I spent most of my time at my mom's bedside coming to grips with losing my mother for a second time. My dad told her he had forgiven her and he still loved her, something I thought I'd never hear him say. One day in the future, you and I are going to have to sit down and calmly have that talk we should have had years ago, he said, holding her hand. She smiled and he kissed her goodbye. A day later, her husband Dan and I watched as her breathing stopped and she passed on to a life without pain and suffering. She'd found religion years ago and the priest gave her the last rites to speed her on her way to heaven. It was 5 days after our daughter's birth, and still we hadn't picked a name for her. We didn't want to choose just any name. We wanted it to be something special, one we could tell her years later why we named her what we did. It came to us a day later. We looked down at Isabella Jane Moore sleeping in her crib, and life was good again. We could tell her about the 2 guardian angels in heaven we had named her after, who would be looking down and protecting her. Both sides were there in force for her christening at St. Timothy's Church. The party at my dad's house almost rivaled our engagement party. In attendance were 2 proud parents, 3 beaming grandparents, a delighted sister, and a large extended family that would always watch out for her. 3 weeks later, Dan showed up at our apartment. I could tell he's still grieving. We did our best to make him comfortable. Your mom went through her own personal hell after she left you and your father. She may not always have been there for you, but she always loved you. You can't imagine what it was like for her after you allowed her back into your life. It was like she was given the second chance she never had. He was having a hard time speaking. Here, he said, handing me an envelope. She wanted you to have this. I looked at Dan and then Regina and opened the envelope. It was a check for $75,000. It was a life insurance policy she took out for you through her work. I didn't know anything about it until just before she died. Your mom said to tell you she hopes it makes up for a little part of the pain she caused you all those years. I was tearing up. I again looked at Dan and Regina. There is also an annuity set up for your daughter she can get when she's 18. By then there should be enough to pay for her college education. Regina and I thanked him, telling him again how sorry we were for his loss. Your mother and I had some great times. I'm going to miss her terribly. I only ask that you will allow me to see your daughters once in a while. I think seeing both girls will help me remember what I had. After he left, we just looked at each other before grabbing one another. I guess we're going to get the house we dreamed about, after all. Maybe a little bit after the fact, but nonetheless the 4 of us will have a place we can call home, thanks to your mother. Next week, Regina and I will celebrate our 35th wedding anniversary. 2 years after Isabella Jane, we had one more baby, a son named Robert. We are as happy today as we were the day we got married. Many friends and loved ones have passed on. I think about them every day. 25 years ago, my dad remarried, retiring 5 years later. He and his wife went to live in the Florida sun in a retirement community called Temple Gardens. We drove down once a year for the holidays to spend a week with him and his wife, Julie. During a visit years ago, we were sitting on his back deck enjoying a little quiet time while the women were getting supper together. Dad, I was cleaning out the garage the other day and came across something I think you might want to have since I no longer have any use for it. I had gift wrapped it and stuck a huge red bell on the top. He ripped into it, and when he finally saw it, he just looked at me and smiled. Worked, didn't it? Yes, it did, but I don't need it any longer. It was the equalizer he'd made me all those years ago. He slipped his thin hand into the strap, smacked it against his other hand, and smiled. I showed it to Robert when he was growing up. I told him the story about how I only had to use it once. I let him know if he ever needed it, it was there for him to use. Thank God, he never had to. I was a hard-nosed back then. Guess I've mellowed with age. Dad, we all have. My dad stayed around for many more years, then he went to have that conversation with my mother. The one he'd promised her years earlier. Regina and me? Well, like I said, we're happy, and every time we get ready for bed I think back to our honeymoon, the bed we wore out and the outfit she wore. She may have gained a few pounds over the years, but she's still my hot Latin mama. Now if I could just get her to clean up her language a bit, she'd be the perfect wife. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.